What's up, my fellow scruffy looking nerf herders, and welcome to the Carbonite Chat. Today we're going to be talking a little bit of the Star Wars kind of business, and particularly how Deadline, in particular, who's been posting each year after a movie comes out how much money that movie made, and saying that it's made more money than any other movie of all the other movies that's come out. And it's interesting, as I was trying to break down some of the numbers for an article that I believe Deadline did about how much money that Solo's going to lose. And it seemed like they were really not telling the truth about that. And I'll cover that in a later video. But as I was looking at the numbers trying to figure it out, because the only way to figure it out is predictive, and the best way to predict it is to go back and look at the prior movies that have come out before with The Last Jedi, Rogue One, and The Force Awakens. And so as I began to look through those and look at other websites' numbers, I began to kind of catch on to a trend, particularly trying to predict how much money the DVD sales are going to make, because we can get a good idea of the box office because it's almost been out a month now. But the question comes with the extra money afterwards with TV deals and with the DVD sales. Now, around this time, they started releasing that The Last Jedi was the #1 selling DVD, but looking over it, one of the numbers that they put was that how much money it made in the worldwide DVD sales. Now, I found this interesting because I've been looking into it prior to this, that they've only put out 3 weeks on Blu-ray sales, or 3 weeks on DVD sales, and 4 weeks on Blu-ray sales. Now, I'm going to go through all the numbers for each movie, and what you will see is that they've actually lied about how much money that they've made. Now, this is the media and not Lucasfilm or Star Wars. And so I will go through all the numbers. All the links will be posted down below, and I'll also kind of post kind of the key point of what I'm making at that time just on the screen for you able to see with the highlighted area of what I'm particularly talking about. Now, first we want to go through The Force Awakens and kind of work our way down and see how they've lied for, I believe, $170 million so far about how much money that's been made by Star Wars that was not made by Star Wars. And so the first one begins with the Force Awakens. Deadline said that the DVD domestic home entertainment, which is the DVD and Blu-ray sales, made $272 million. Now, the website The Numbers says the domestic home is $188 million. Now, The Numbers uses Home Media Magazine to update and check their numbers to constantly make sure that they're right. In an article by Variety called Star Wars The Force Awakens Dominates All 3 Disc Charts, they used the numbers from Home Media Magazine as well to get their DVD sales. Now, this is important because, one, I'm using thenumbers.com or maybe org. And for most people, they may say, well, you're just picking someone that's not as big of a proponent of Star Wars versus who's, you know, a proponent. And so it's just kind of apples to oranges. Who's right? We don't know. And you're just saying that the side that you're on is right. But what I'm showing here is that you've got a big name Variety, which is obviously a proponent of making Disney and Star Wars happy. And they're using Home Media Magazine. And this is also important because it's not just two names, because again, you may not respect the names of any of these, but Variety is owned by Penske Media Corporations, who also owns Deadline. So it's the two same companies. They have the same parent company running them. So making the connection that Variety is using this, and I know it's going to be run by completely different people, but the fact that there is this connection being made and that one's using this numbers.org and using Home Media Magazine because it is the #1 source of being able to find out how much there are sales for DVDs, then that leaves it where there's a little bit more ground to the side that I'm arguing versus what Deadline has, which is just kind of what Deadline's saying. And so it doesn't really hold itself up. So you have 188 million by the numbers.org for their total for domestic versus 272 million for Deadline. Now, this is an $84 million difference just for the domestic. We're not even getting into the worldwide numbers because ultimately the numbers only focuses on the domestic total and not the foreign, and the rest of them, they have just worldwide home entertainment, and I will break down the numbers for those to kind of show you what the idea you can get when you see how much money worldwide was made by The Force Awakens, and then that number for what they had for the domestic total, to be able to get a rough estimate on what the worldwide total is compared to the numbers.com versus the Deadline article. Now next we'll move into Rogue One. Now Deadline says in their article that the worldwide home total for Rogue One is $182 million. The Numbers says the domestic home total was $83 million. Now Deadline said in the Force Awakens breakdown that their foreign total was $160 million for the foreign to the $272 million for the domestic. That's a 59% difference. Now the Force Awakens did better foreign than domestic, yet Rogue One did less foreign than domestic. And so I think because if you look at the box office, it's fair to say that it's not going to make more money foreign than The Force Awakens did when it didn't make more money box office wise. So we'll just keep it even. I'm not going to lower the number to adjust for the difference to the box office. So just again, so if you're trying to say I'm being unfair here when I'm judging how much money Deadline has actually kind of lied about. But that makes it from 83 million, 59% makes it 49 million. Now you add those together, that's $132 million. Deadline said that it made $182 million. Well, right here we're looking at now a $50 million overestimate. It's not a small chunk of money. That's a quite large chunk of money. So now let's get into what they said for The Last Jedi. Now this is where, again, we're going to have to run a little bit more numbers because, as I said at the beginning, right now we've only had 3 weeks released for both DVDs and Blu-ray, and we've only had week 4 for Blu-ray. So I'm only going to cover the first 3 weeks when I'm kind of doing my numbers, because I don't think it's fair, because we don't know exactly what the DVD number is, because we've only got the information for the Blu-ray sales of week 4. So looking at the first 3 weeks, first off, we have the Deadline information. Deadline puts the worldwide home entertainment take, which again is DVD sales, at $222 million. The Numbers says that the domestic home entertainment take for the first 3 weeks is $54 million. Rogue One had a $43 million domestic through week 3. They also had a similar, around 75% drop in Blu-ray sales for week 4. So if we take the first 3 weeks of sales from The Last Jedi and compare them to the first 3 weeks of Rogue One, and we double it, which is what I did, which I showed that it's actually not quite what happened with Rogue One, but to be fair, and again to show that I'm overestimating these numbers, because I'm going to be pointing out that Deadline's lying about a large chunk. Maybe not lying, but it's hard to say that you're not lying when you're going to be close to $200 million overestimating someone's profit numbers. And that's kind of a big deal. So if you double the 53 million, of course you come out to 106 million. But now we only have the domestic total. But Deadline said with the worldwide total of $222 million. So using the same kind of numbers that I showed for Rogue One, with comparing it to The Force Awakens and showing what The Force Awakens made foreign, which was 59% of the total of the worldwide was what the domestic was. So what would be 59%, $180 million, 59% of $180 million is where you get around that $106 million number that we have domestic for the Numbers for The Last Jedi. So that's $180 million is a fair estimate. I think even still kind of going up a little bit, because this is also ignoring the divisiveness of the movie. The amount of people that don't want to have it on Blu-ray or DVD because they didn't like it. And whether that number's 50% or 30%, that's still a good number, and it should affect it, just like if we saw how the drop-off of The Last Jedi box office was a lot harsher than other movies before, but I'm ignoring all of that. So it actually can be worse than I'm even beginning to say. I'm overestimating everything, but still Deadline's number comes out to a $42 million overestimate. And again, that's not small. And yet again, I will point out, because I did with The Force Awakens, I will also show that Rogue One has talked about with an article by Variety, again using the Home Media magazine, which is the same company that the Numbers uses to get their numbers and information on the DVD and Blu-ray sales, and The Last Jedi. Variety has also done an article saying the same thing while using the same exact company. That comes out with the numbers that I just said there, to a $178 million overestimate by Deadline on how much profits just from the DVD sales. And that's not counting everything else. They got the box office number right, obviously, because there's so many companies that point out to that they don't, it would look too weird for them to be lying about it. But they're also kind of guessing on how much the TV rights are, how much the foreign TV rights are, and a lot of other numbers that they're suggesting on. And I could also show that they're probably suggesting how much money that the movies cost. They're underselling that. But again, I'm not saying that Star Wars isn't making any money. This is totally trying to point out this because I found it interesting, and so I want to do a video on it and kind of get some people's ideas on what they think it actually means, why Deadline's doing this. And I just found it interesting as I was doing some research, and so I wanted to break it all down. But $178 million, you also have to remember, even though that's for the 3 movies that's come out so far, that's not including the foreign numbers on The Force Awakens, because I just used the numbers because in the Force Awakens breakdown by Deadline, they had them separated between domestic and foreign. So I just showed how much money that they had lied on, saying that it made $272 million domestically, while actually that's not what the numbers said. And again, I've been pointing out how the numbers has a little bit better track record right now than Deadline has. And they actually overestimated it by $84 million. Now that $84 million overestimate is 30% of the $272 million. Now if you go back and look at the article by Deadline, what they ended up showing was that the foreign number was $160 million. 30% of the $160 million comes out to $48 million. $48 million plus the $178 million would be $226 million, I believe. My math may be wrong on that, but I think that that's right. $226 million of overestimation by Deadline. That's almost $250 million for 3 movies for just one section of the profit numbers on just the Blu-ray and DVD sales. That to me is something I thought was worth bringing up. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and comments down below. I'm not 100% sure on how I feel on what this kind of the ramifications of this. Obviously, this doesn't say that Disney's lying to their shareholders, but it is kind of creating this storyline that Star Wars is being much more profitable than it is. Again, it is profitable outside of Solo, which has lost money, and that's where I kind of got on this track. And I'll probably next Monday do a video breaking down what the predicted, since I did all this work to figure out kind of the, what the numbers are so far with the prior 3 movies, that it should be a little bit easier for me to put together the numbers of how much money Solo's going to make, because they have released that they say it's going to be a $50 to $80 million loss. And I think it's going to be more, at least 9 figures, maybe up to $200 million loss for this movie, which is going to be a huge ordeal, especially when you look at the numbers that we've known of, that the people out in the world have been using for how much money Star Wars has made, has been wrong. Just on that number. That's not picking apart every little minute detail. And again, that would be something, if people are interested in this video, that I might do a little bit later. That's going to take a lot more work, so I'm not promising that's going to happen. We'll see how this video goes and the interest behind it. But I look forward to hearing your thoughts, why you think they're doing it. I always will enjoy a nice little conspiracy theory that will go down there below. But I think that just what I've presented in this video isn't a conspiracy. It's just kind of an interesting little, truth that I've cracked about Deadline and what they're saying about the Star Wars numbers. But anyways, not to ramble on and on, I'm sure this video has been long enough. Thank you very much for watching, and never forget, you Nerf herders, I love you.